Welcome to the smoke-filled room. I'm going to admit I'm probably not going to be in the greatest of moods this podcast or this episode because Lane Davis, our producer, and I are on the road. We're out in Virginia, so I'm stuck in a hotel room, which means no cigar. I don't even have a whiskey. I got nothing. So we'll see just how good of a mood I can be in this podcast. The good news is we've got some awesome guests with us. We've got some meaty topics to cover. We're going to have a little bit of fun along the way. Let me introduce who's with us today. We have State Representative Paul Jacobs from the 118th District. He's a doctor as an optometrist. And this little tidbit's going to make my wife pretty excited. He's owned a winery for 27 years. So, Paul, you're already my wife's favorite guest, and you haven't even opened your mouth yet.
Unfortunately, I sold the winery to do this. How stupid is that? That's almost as bad as Batinick quitting.
Not serious. I mean, at this point, I got to tell you, like, I don't, now you're my wife's least favorite guest. You just went from top to bottom and that quickly.
But we still get a lot of wine.
All right, well, there you go. There you go. Speaking of Mark Batinick, he's the former House Republican floor leader. He's a pollster and political expert. Mark, glad to have you with us.
Thanks for having me on. Excited for this week's show.
And we have Patrick Pfingsten. He's the founder, editor, and producer of the Illinoize, also the morning show host for WMAY News out of Springfield, right? Patrick, glad to have you.
Hello, friends.
We also have, of course, political experts, Michael Butler, Chris Jackowiak. Neither one of them has had any sleep, so don't look for them to stay awake the whole podcast, but we're glad at least that they've had some Red Bull to get us going.
That's right.
Does that
Good
mean
to
we
be
have
here.
company mandated nap time now, Colin? Is that in our contract?
It's definitely not in the contract, but you can have unpaid nap time if you'd like.
I think we're going to be striking for that next year, Colin, for paid nap time.
All right, we're going to start at a couple energy topics. We've got one of the energy experts from the House Republican caucus here in Representative Jacobs, which is not an accident. We've got some energy topics that I've wanted to get to here for, frankly, one of these has been on here for months. And we got to talk about them, especially as we get near to the election. So first one we need to talk about is there was an editorial a few weeks ago talking about how an energy crisis is looming in Illinois. And frankly, people aren't paying attention, even down in Springfield. I know Republicans have been screaming about this. People just have not been paying attention. And to me, this is thanks to policies passed by Pritzker and the Illinois Democrats. What we're seeing is energy costs skyrocketing for households, but especially for manufacturers and small businesses. We're also seeing reliability going down. What many people will tell you, including Pritzker just this week, will tell you that reliability is one of the hallmarks of the Illinois electrical grid and one of the few things we have to point to when it comes to trying to bring businesses and manufacturers to this state. And so anything that jeopardizes our reliability is a problem. And CEJA and a number of the bills that have been passed down in Springfield by Pritzker and his Democrats have significantly impacted our energy supply and our reliability in a negative way. I want to start with you, Paul, on this topic, then we'll open it up to everybody else. But Paul, I know this is something you've been talking about for a while, so the floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, the coal, I mean, think about it. As soon as that passed, and even before, they've been messing with the coal. All of our electricity is coal and natural gas. So they immediately shut down Jaffa over in Patrick, Windhorse. And one of the side effects of this stuff that they didn't really think about or realize, or if they did, it was pretty terrible that they didn't do anything about it. But they shut down my natural gas plant in Grand Tower. And it's a peaker plant, so it was extremely useful when it was needed. But if it's not needed, okay, great. But they shut it down. What they didn't allow for, not even considering the energy, was the $1.3 million that went to the school district. 1.3 million went off of the roll. That's it. So I had to go to talk to the Democrat side and say, look, you guys have this thing going on, but you have not allowed for anything, including the lack of electricity generated by anything. But you didn't do anything for the school kids. I mean, what are we supposed to do? So they did put a 1.3 in 3 years ago. And then Patrick made me go in and talk to them also about Jaffa. So over there in his district, they also surprisingly had 1.3 million went out in the coal mines closed. So it's exactly 1.3 million. It's not important, but it was. So I had to get that on there too. I got them on, but then they said, don't come back next year. So the next year, we sent Senator Fowler over to go ahead and talk to him to get it. Now they have told him, don't come back next year. So I don't know what we're going to do this next time around. I'm hoping that they've gotten they're in districts. My Alexander County is #1 poorest county. Pulaski County, #2 poorest county, and they're closing up everything in those counties. Jackson County with SIU, Jackson County, number 3 poorest county. So if you shut down some of the things that are creating the electricity, how do you expect that the electricity is going to get here? Unfortunately, down here with the co-ops, we have been able to buy from Kentucky, et cetera, Tennessee, but it's not going to last forever, especially if you're converting everything to EVs. And we're going to have EVs and charging stations. I wonder how in the heck is that going to work? I mean, there's so many things that are wrong.
And our state went from an energy exporter to an energy importer. I mean, there's just a lot of problems with this where, you say that we want to be cleaner and have cleaner energy. Well, if you import all your energy from states that are producing them with coal and natural gas, all you've done is raise prices on consumers while you feel better about yourself. And that's really what a lot of this boils down to is we feel like we're doing something for the environment without actually doing something to help the environment.
Many of the coal companies that are working right now until 28, I think 27, 28 is when they have to shut down. They will and are exporting that coal. They're making the mint actually, but they can't use it in the United States. They can't sell it here, and they are selling it overseas. So, and they're selling it in 2 states that can burn our coal, and those are the states we buy it from. So I guess if we transfer all of the icky air down there, and we're burning coal just clean. I mean, we're burning coal clean as you can possibly burn it, and we've got hundreds of years of it left. So I'm just not a big proponent of anything else except maybe nuclear. I like nuclear, and that really gets people crazy. But yeah, anybody has anything on that, shoot in there.
Look, this is what I said at the time. Taking the garbage from your backyard and throwing it over the fence to your neighbor's backyard is not cleaning up the neighborhood. That was my argument at the time. This is dumb. When electricity is being produced by coal in the state of Illinois, at least we have regulatory control to a certain extent over it. You ship it across the border, you have nothing. Missouri, Kentucky, those places were chomping at the bit for us to pass that legislation because they knew they were going to, be selling us a bunch of electricity made by coal. So we didn't do anything. But everybody went down there, does the thing. They got their press release, pat themselves on the back. It's typical of legislation in Illinois all too often is that it's feel good, it's press release legislation, but in terms of what it actually does in trying to address issues, it doesn't address it.
Well, and we're looking at, this is causing already significant increases in energy costs, especially in northern Illinois. Meanwhile, in central and southern Illinois, the major impact is on reliability, as you just mentioned with the peaker plants and everything else that are, as these goes down, it's reliability that really is the biggest impact, let alone cost. And so there are 2 factors here that this leads to, that both of which are problematic for residents, but especially for businesses, especially for manufacturing. Our next topic, we'll talk about some of the things that Pritzker's trying to bring to the state, and this will of course have an impact on that conversation as well. But I don't want to skip ahead in our agenda.
Democrats want to cut down carbon, which is great. Makes perfect sense. They think they can replace it completely with wind and solar. They can't, at least not right now, at least not with the economic conditions. And it's still too dirty to make many of those solar panels anyway. So you're not really getting a net positive. The thing that they've really missed on, and I think this is broad for the left, is nuclear. There is no more cost-efficient, cleaner energy that we can provide people today than nuclear. And we have put Byron and Braidwood and Morris and all of these Clinton on death watch in recent years because of a lack of support in both the state and federal government. And if we were serious, if this state was serious, I'm talking Republicans and Democrats, there would be real investment in nuclear, not the parsed out little wannabe modular nuclear you can power a plant with it, but real.
Yeah, they vetoed that too.
The governor did veto that, but though the sponsors asked him to veto that because there was some language issue, if I remember correctly. I don't have that story in front of me, but they didn't they end up passing the fix?
Yeah,
or
but
not?
we were going to have Sue was going to join us. Sue Resum was going to join us today, and unfortunately couldn't make it. But obviously, she wanted to talk nuclear, so you're speaking right from her language.
Well, Sue and I speak from the same playbook on that one because I think she's right that investing in nuclear is clean, it's safe.
Well,
3
and
Mile
to
Island
Paul's
was how
point,
many?
I mean, so we do a lot of work in Lake County, including Zion, and you see what happens to these communities where these plants get closed. I mean, Zion has been trying to recover from that ever since the plant closed, and it's devastated the community. And just like you said, Paul, in your area, some of the poorest areas of this state are feeling the impact of these closures beyond just, we talk about energy costs, middle class families, it's, oh, my energy bill's more expensive. Small businesses, my energy bill's more expensive. But I'm glad you brought up what you did, Paul, because some of the poorest Illinoisans are being hurt the worst by this because they're losing their jobs. And that's a way bigger impact than us paying an extra 15 or 25 or $35 on our energy bill per month. I mean, that's a devastating impact.
It is. It is.
I mean, I think it's just.
Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's just another example of them governing by press release, kind of like Mark alluded to, we produce less, well, that we still have to have that energy. So we're purchasing energy from another state or another country that's not producing it as efficiently as we would and as environmentally sound. So you're paying more for, at the end of the day, a worse environment.
Yeah, we're saying something that's right. Microsoft's going to open up 3 Mile Island. So, I mean, they apparently feel that it's not that bad. They're going to go ahead and open that up and produce so that they can do AI.
And that's pushing 50 years ago, right? Was it the 70s or was it the early? I forget now. I don't have my history textbook memorized, but it was a long freaking time ago. And safety regulations have come a long way since then. You cannot make the sale at this point that nuclear isn't safe. It ain't Chernobyl.
No.
So why are we not investing in
March 28th, 1979? And you're right. They did do a fix. So
did you have hair? Did you have hair in 79, Batinick?
A little bit.
Okay.
Let's go to the next topic because I think this dovetails very nicely with the current topic, which is something that's been bugging me for a while now. As you see all these press releases and events and ribbon cuttings from Pritzker as they're pushing these new industries that they want to bring to Illinois, these data centers, this quantum computing campus, obviously this push to electric vehicles. All this sounds great and it looks great in a spread on TV or in a mail piece for a campaign. But what I can't seem to true up is while Pritzker and the Democrats are reducing our energy supply in the state, we are bringing in these industries that are 100% reliant on this energy that we're reducing the supply of. I mean, at this point, you look at the problem this is going to lead to down the line, because literally what fuels these things like data centers and quantum computing is massive, massive, massive amounts of electricity, of energy, and the reliability of those things. And those are the two things that Pritzker and the Democrats, through the bills that they've passed, have been reducing and hurting. And so I don't understand how you can, especially the media, though it's not surprising, how they're not connecting these dots, that this is going to be a problem and it's going to be a problem very soon. It sounds great that we're pursuing these things, but as our energy supply reduces and as the reliability is hurt, those are the two things that these industries need to survive.
Well, the bottom line is that the Pritzker administration doesn't care about their energy bills. They've been far too busy giving away billions of dollars in our tax incentives to lure them here. So if they're not paying property taxes or state income taxes, then they've got extra money to pay those energy bills. It's us on the other end that get screwed.
Yeah, my big issue with the whole thing is that if you have to do mass incentives to bring people here, it means there's a fundamental problem with your organic situation. And how about the people that have been here? Where's their mass incentives to stay there? That's incredible. I've talked about the high property tax rate in Cook, especially Southern Cook, and I looked at how big data center was going to come to Southern Cook County, and sure enough, they were getting a big property tax incentive. Fix it for everybody, not just the new guy.
Yep. Well, and again, we've had manufacturers on this podcast over the last year and a half, and they've talked about how they're just getting demolished by energy costs right now. Same deal. They're not getting that sort of giveaway. So Patrick, you're right. The balance sheet probably balances out. Hey, you're going to pay more for energy, but we got you covered. We'll give you on this on the other end. But what about those manufacturers, those family-run manufacturers who've been in Illinois for some of them 100+ years? They're not getting any sort of trade-off for that. They're not getting that benefit. And this is going to overload the grid. There's no doubt about this. The more they bring in here, these are energy sucking industries. Listen, I'm a young guy. I want us to be thinking to the future, but you can't cheer up. Hey, we don't want to produce more energy. We're anti-nuclear, but we want to bring in these industries that require massive, massive amounts of energy. I mean, it's just intellectually dishonest.
How about
Well,
solar?
Most of
Solar-
the most
ahead,
of the
Chris.
time most of the time it just comes down to a lot of these energy talks is that my lobbyist is better than your lobbyist, and unfortunately, in regards to Mark's point, the taxpayer of Southern Cook County doesn't really have an effective lobbyist right now. It's down in Springfield as perhaps the renewable energy people do. These are people who have been in the game. The renewable energy game goes back to the early 2000s, the 90s, the 80s, well beyond that. They've been building this up as solar and wind is this is the cutting edge, and nobody's modernized since then. And these people are stuck in these old talking points of this is the future of energy. This is the future of energy. Well, these are people who are just ripping off the American taxpayer because they're the ones getting the incentive to do these things. If 20, 30 years ago, nuclear was the hot cheese on the block, we would have been in a much better position in terms of energy. But that's not the case. I mean, we had the hot fad of solar and wind power, and all we ended up getting was less energy and a bunch of dead birds, as Trump likes to put.
You're basically writing the story of ethanol, essentially, and this is sort of that new ethanol now. But I remember when I first started in politics, writing an energy plan for one of my clients. This was 2006, and I remember reading about the massive potential of algae and how that can produce massive amounts of energy. But we're 18 years after that. God, I've been doing politics for almost 20 years, and I haven't heard anything about that since because it's wind, solar. They've got the political clout.
Buddy, you're talking to a guy who used to lobby for corn growers. So let me tell you the wonders of ethanol that lower our dependence on foreign oil, that burn cleaner, that reduce the cost of gasoline. It is a net positive, and there are no more federal subsidies for it.
But
So
my point is simply that we sort of stop there. Not that ethanol isn't great. It's that once something becomes the thing, we sort of stop there and say, okay, what's the next thing? Wind and solar are not going to get us there for clean energy. So what the argument for going to wind and solar, for going to these cleaner sources, is that they're going to be the bridge to the next source. So my question is, where's the next source? Because we're sitting here saying we're going to sit around till wind and solar get us to 100% capacity, and it's never going to happen. So let's stop putting so much into the things that aren't going to get us there, and tell me what's next, because we need to move to what's next.
Well, it's got to be an all the above approach. You've got to do all of those things in order to have, you need that diverse portfolio on energy to make sure that, we have the energy that we need. And, things happen where, something may work today, but may not work as well tomorrow. And they're not taking that approach.
Well, we always like to go ahead, Paul.
What do you do when solar reaches their 25 years from now and they're all dead? They don't work. They have to do something else. And they're kind of curious that the solar manufacturers, not the solar manufacturers, but those that are putting in the solar arrays do 25 years, and they will clean it up. But what if they're out of business? So you have to be very careful on your leases. And I have farmers that have. We're getting ready to put. I think it's still ready to go in Pulaski County, 2,300 acres in solar. And one of the gentlemen that I know very well owns probably half of the acreage in his farm, and he's going to get millions in the rent. But the high wire, the electric main line, goes right through that property. So, but he also knows that in 25 years their lease is up. Then what? And so I made sure that he got a lease that also had some bonding in it, something that if the company is out of business, there is money there to clean that mess up. But they're gonna have to clean it up. They're gonna have to put all brand new solar. I mean, that I don't quite understand how we're planning on making that even a step to the next. I don't know. You talk hydrogen. Hydrogen seems promising, but hydrogen actually leaks through the tanks. It actually seeps through iron tanks. So you have to do something else. And they have found that they can take epoxy resins and coat those tanks, and then they load them up and they throw them in your car, and there you go. I find it a little bit difficult to drive around with 20,000 pounds of pressure in a tank. It's a little unnerving to me. I don't know if I want to have that, especially running next door to an EV. And we're running right even together on 57 or 55, and we're going north to Chicago, and we both blow up. I mean, I'm a little concerned about that from a safety standpoint. But I think that hydrogen does have a big place. I think maybe more than a lot of others, but we have to have hydrogen generators that generate it just as you need it. And I think that would be okay instead of carrying tanks. But solar is a little bit worrisome to me. I don't know.
Well, we always like to put this in political perspective, especially for our viewers and especially those who are involved in campaigns right now. The point here is the reason why we're shining a spotlight on energy is twofold. Number one, we talk about cost of living being a major problem for voters right now, and energy costs, utility costs are a part of that cost of living. And so Democrats have been doing this pretty well. They don't just talk taxes, they bring in other things like utility costs, like energy costs, and Republicans need to do a better job of that because voters are concerned about their energy costs. Small business owners, manufacturers are very concerned about their energy costs. This is something you should be talking about. That cost of living, that cost of doing business in Illinois is among the highest in the entire country, and you absolutely should be talking about it. That's number one. Number two, as your Democratic opponents from Pritzker all the way down want to sit there and crow about how they're making the environment better, we want to equip you to be able to say that they're actually not. As they're saying they're bringing in jobs, as they're bringing in vitality to the state, we're giving you these talking points to help you to deal with those messages because it may sound good in a press release today, but 10 years from now, when we're all fighting over what little energy may be left, we're going to remember what happened today with opening up these huge energy sucking industries in the state. All right, let's move on. I'm going to ask this just right out. Our next topic, does anybody have strong thoughts on gas lines and the ICC? Is this something you guys feel strongly about that you want to talk about? Otherwise, we can skip past it in the agenda. Keep moving. Dr. Jacobs, you're okay with that? All right, we've talked energy.
Yeah.
We had another topic in here, but it's not as juicy as the others, and we got a lot more to get to. So I don't think I've ever done that before, but it's a way to save us some time. So there you go. We're growing in episode, whatever this is, 78 or something. All right, we got to talk about Chicago Public Schools. So CPS, Brandon Johnson, I'm sure those of you who are watching this are aware of what's going on, but essentially over the weekend, Brandon Johnson has forced the resignation of the entire CPS board. He has instilled a brand new board that quickly, had the names already ready to go Monday morning. The assumption is, though, of course, we're just assuming at this point that new board will do Johnson's bidding when it comes to ousting the CPS CEO. Obviously, we'll have to see if that plays out. There's some people who believe they can't legally, but again, we'll have to see what happens. But really, this move is unprecedented. This is at CTU's bidding, where Johnson has completely nobody's done this before. Nobody's seen this done before. As a matter of fact, it's even been brought up that people would be freaking out if another mayor had done this. CTU would be freaking out. Yet here they're applauding it because, of course, it helps their agenda. It is chaos in Chicago public schools. It's always chaos in Chicago, thanks to Brandon Johnson. He had a horrible press conference where he was incredibly combative and came across even more poorly than he typically does. He has a lot of allies or former allies who are coming out against him in this. Most of the city council's coming out against him. And then, of course, you have some of his few remaining allies who are coming out publicly and blaming this all on Pritzker somehow, which those of you know I will try my darndest to blame pretty much anything I can on JB Pritzker. And this one's a little bit of a stretch to put this one on Pritzker's plate. So all I'm going to say is it's basically the popcorn emoji for me. I'm just going to eat popcorn as this all goes down. You guys feel free to talk about it. But to me, if your opponents are in disarray, that only helps you. So it's fine by me if these guys want to have this drama.
Well, we're enjoying it over. I'm helping out Nicole, who's doing really well with her campaign, but her opponent donated to Brandon Johnson and has close ties to their team. And the timing of his whatever you want to call it, his implosion is perfect for us. So we're not only having popcorn, we have a big old smile on our face. Coming to a mailbox in the 82nd district multiple times already has. So that's my thought on this. He's an absolute a disaster, empty soup, has not run or done anything or had any sort of success. He blames everything on race. If he had to lead something on his own, he couldn't do it. There's nothing there. There's never an original thought that I've seen. It's just the Mr. Blame game. It's pretty sad that the third largest city, there's competent Democrats. He's not one of them.
I mean, he's not even 2 years into his term. I mean, they got another 2 years of this in the city of Chicago. You get what you vote for sometimes.
May I do something out of step for this podcast? I'm going to defend JB Pritzker for a minute.
Okay.
There is this coalition of uber progressives on the city council, along with CTU, which has lost all connection with reality, that seem to believe it's JB Pritzker's fault because he has not raised taxes and that he has not forked over $1 billion a year in new money just for CTU, or just for, pardon me, mostly for CTU, but just for CPS, for a school district that is already the most funded per pupil than any other school district in the state. They can't keep their house in order, but yet it's JB Pritzker's fault that they continue to spend more on education, more than we've ever spent on education in the history of this state. And the governor says, first of all, Brandon Johnson hasn't even made the ask for $1 billion of new revenue. He hasn't actually gone to the governor and said, we need your help. Please get us some more money, because we can't create it without shipping everyone out of the state with higher property taxes. They can't even make the ask. So Pritzker can't even say no if they don't make the ask. So, but CTU is trying to make the most liberal governor in the history of this state the bad guy in a funding fight. That's just how far off the rails this whole thing has gotten. And I give the governor more credit in a lot of places than you guys do, and I certainly criticize him a lot, but he has been relatively consistent in his position that we're not going to spend money on publicly funded stadiums. We're not going to overspend on things that we really can't afford. He didn't want to pay for long-term programs with COVID money. He lost a few of those battles with the legislature, but generally he has stood firm on those. And I respect that. A lot of things I disagree with in his funding priorities, but to blame him for CTU's wish list is just BS.
You know, after I 100% agree with Patrick. Which, you know, again, mark the date and time. Everybody.
That's two, by the way. That's
yeah,
two
I know.
today.
Keep the tally. But the thing is that before Johnson took over, we all asked ourselves, how worse can it get than Lori Lightfoot? There were people on the night of the
now we know. Now we know.
Right, now we know. There were people on the night of the 2019 mayoral election who were trying to figure out 2023 that night because they already knew Lori Lightfoot was going to be a disaster. Brandon Johnson is putting Lori Lightfoot to shame. One of the things about, I'll defend Lori Lightfoot. He defended JB Pritzker. I'll defend Lori Lightfoot.
What is happening to this podcast?
Lori Lightfoot fucking hated, I'm sorry for swearing, but she hated the teachers union. The teachers union hated her back. She would not have put up with any of this stuff. She laid down the law with CTU that you're not getting anything. I'm not getting. Part of that was because of her ego. It wasn't necessarily based on policy, but part of it was because of her ego. But this guy genuinely has no idea what he's doing, to the extent that Andre Vasquez, who's probably running for mayor in 2027 based on the things he's posting on social media, he seems like a right-wing conservative on social media right now for some of the things he's saying about Brandon Johnson. He's going toe-to-toe with the Twitter socialists. This is a guy who's a member of the Democratic Socialists of America who is saying, guys, I think we need to take a step back here. What are we doing? And that's just shows that Johnson has very few allies. I think he's down to basically 4 on the Chicago City Council, maybe 5, maybe 6, but the number isn't higher than 10 for certainly. Johnson has gotten so off the rails, and there is 0% chance that he will be reelected mayor of the city of Chicago. There is a non-zero chance that someone like Tony Preckwinkle picks up the phone or sends somebody to Brandon Johnson's office and says, listen, buddy, you're done. You're resigning for health reasons, because at this point, nobody is coming to save this person, to save the mayor of Chicago. JB Pritzker is not coming to save him. Tony Preckwinkle's not coming to save him. The Chicago City Council isn't coming to save him. And certainly the voters are not going to come to save Brandon Johnson's ass in another 2.5 years.
Well, to Batinick's point, the worse that Johnson does, the more effective of a political tactic it is to tie Democrats to Johnson. We had Kim Foxx. Before that, we had Mike Madigan. I mean, Brandon Johnson may be the more politically vulnerable of all of those when it comes to some of these Democrats, simply because he's disliked across the spectrum. I mean, there were plenty of Democrats who still liked Kim Foxx. There were a lot of Democrats who still liked Mike Madigan, and we'll talk about that soon. But at this point, you are hard pressed to find Republican, Democrat, anyone who will defend Brandon Johnson.
And it also buys the legislature some time too, because of Johnson's repeated missteps. He argued in his awful press conference this week that he supported the evidence-based funding bill. Was that 2017 when he was working for CTU? When CTU actually opposed it because the school tax credit was in there and they wanted the bill dead. So he lied about his own position on the bill that he's opposing now. So they have zero credibility at the State House.
Speaking of the State House,
hold on 1 second. Paul was going to jump in. Go ahead, Paul.
I was just going to say, I'm sure glad I spend more time on the opposite end of the state, and I much prefer to be in Carroll than I do in Chicago. But this is just like insanity. I watch that what's going on up there, and I'm going, my. But I think it's wonderful. I think it's absolutely wonderful.
It's not wonderful, though. It's not wonderful. It's terrible. No, these kids are getting terrible education. The teachers union has run amok. The greatest city in the Midwest is a laughing stock across this country. It's the economic driver for our entire state. This is not funny.
No, that part's not true. Awful. I'm tired of that. I'm tired of people saying it's the economic driver. It's the burbs. It's the burbs now. The money comes from the burbs. The Chicago.
Well, the payroll comes from the burbs because nobody lives in the city anymore.
Chicago is a net giver and taker of stuff. The state people that provide the tax dollar for the state of Illinois are the collar counties that lose out like 2-1.
Yeah, the collar counties get 60% of our tax dollar back.
It depends on the county, but yeah.
Yeah, it's brutal, and it's the worst in the whole state. So to that point, Mark, I absolutely agree to that.
The point I want to make from a political angle is it's amazing to see some of the legislators start walking sideways also. My favorite example of this is Senator Martwick. Senator Martwick endorsed Brandon Johnson. He might have been the only ethnic white politician in Chicago who actually endorsed Brandon Johnson's election, and he's one of the CTU's strongest allies down in Springfield. But even you see him, he's walking sideways against some of the stuff in his political ads lately. I mean, he's talking about how he's a tough on crime candidate, even though he supported the Safety Act. He's, fighting for lower taxes and all this stuff. This is Rob Martwick, one of the most progressive legislators out of the city of Chicago. And because you can tell these people understand from a political angle that it is not in their best interest to be tied to the CTU and Brandon Johnson right now. So it behooves the Republican Party and the anti-CTU Democrats out there, because I know you're watching too, that you need to utilize Brandon Johnson in your advantage. This guy is not going away unless Tony Preckwinkle pulls the plug on the guy. So utilize him. This guy sucks. Utilize him and get some better people in there for the city of Chicago. And I'm very interested, as a final point, to see how all of this affects the elected school board election in November, because that's something that's not being talked a lot about right now. I was promised a disaster in the Chicago school board election, meaning I was expecting the punches being thrown every day. I was expecting millions of dollars being thrown. I'm not seeing the money right now. So
CTU ran out of money. I mean, CTU ran out of cash because they mortgaged it all.
Cash. I mean, the concern from a lot of those groups was that INCS was waiting way too long, and it proved to be correct. I mean, a lot of those groups were really nervous because INCS's plan was based on starting super, super late, despite the fact that I had a lot of money. It was told to me in confidence. I wasn't able to talk about it until now. They're finally spending. But those of us who do politics know you can't wait until 4 weeks out. We're now, as of this recording, less than 4 weeks from election day to actually start spending your money. And they waited way too long. So they may have risked their chances of winning these races just by waiting so damn long. But the money, Chris, is finally starting to flow.
Well, good. I'm glad to see the money being thrown, and I'm very interested to see how CTU candidates do on November 5th, because the message has got to get out there. You can't get these CTU people elected to the school board. It just can't happen, because you don't want this to get any worse than it already has been.
Paul, close us out. I just saw you raising your hand. Go ahead and close us out.
I just wanted to not correct Patrick, but make a comment. I do think it's very hilarious up there in Chicago, but our school systems down here have just as much trouble. Gosh, do you think it might be the unions that are running the teachers? I'm not sure. But I think that our teachers are very, very concerned. And I think many of the teachers here are actually leaving the state because they can't work here. And that's a terrible thing. Our kids are the ones that are getting screwed royally from south up. Caro unfortunately graduated 18 kids this year. 18. So there's things that we have to do, and we better get on it right now. But I'm still going to laugh at Chicago.
So let's move to our next topic here. We're going to skip one on the agenda, guys. We're going to go straight to Madigan here, just for time. Patrick, since I know you wrote a piece on this in the Illinoize, I'll let you kind of kick us off. But essentially here, the conversation is over this. The Madigan trial has started. This is going to drag on for a pretty long time. And the question on the table is, are Republicans going to take the bait here? I've obviously worded this a certain way on purpose. Are Republicans going to take the bait here and get dragged off message and start talking Madigan yet again with 4 weeks left in the election? But the Illinoize did a great piece. You had a great opinion piece on this, Patrick. So why don't you kick us off on this topic?
Well, it wasn't my opinion. I did my opinion on it months ago, where I said I don't think Republicans should take the bait. And now that it's on us, it seems as if the Republican establishment or those that run or has been a part of these races are pretty split on the idea that one, the election has to be focused on cost of living and property taxes and the economy in general, right? That's the message that Republicans win with. For whatever resources they have to be spent on those issues where Democrats are vulnerable. The other line of thinking is that Republicans are being so drastically outspent, are being generally outclassed in every campaign that they're running, at least competitive campaign that they're running, that they just need to throw stuff at the wall. Right, that they need to find whatever they can that might resonate with people. Jim Durkin was on the radio with me this week, and he thinks that there's huge public interest in this race, in this campaign, or in this trial. I really don't think that's true. I don't think that the public really gives a damn about a guy who's been out of office now for almost 4 full years and is a thing of the past in a state where corruption is forgotten the next day. I did have one longtime Republican insider who came up with, I thought, a pretty good idea, was for whether it's the state party or the HRO or something like that, use that bank of cameras at Dirksen Federal Building every day to your advantage. Get someone out there, get them in front of the cameras, make sure you're talking about not only corruption, because that might get into the story, especially if it's a small, smooth, quiet day in trial, or you don't have any tapes to play or something like that, but also work your own talking points in. Get McCombie in front of the cameras, get Laha in front of the cameras, get Phil Nagel in front of the cameras if you're Senate Republicans and want a piece of the action. There's a way to take advantage of that with earned media that they have not been doing very well.
And Patrick, you're a comms guy, you're a messaging guy like I am, and so I'm going to speak a language that we both, I know, agree on, which is,
and we put everyone else to sleep at the same time.
Pretty much, but it's not hard to frame a message, and yet Republicans really struggle with framing a message, and that's frankly what you can do here. You can take the corruption issue and say, how much has corruption cost Illinoisans? And now you're talking about cost of living, and now you can transition into your talking points. You can absolutely start on the ground of the Madigan trial and bring it into your talking points if you have a theme. That only happens if you have a theme. Republicans struggle with that. We never seem to come up with a theme we can stick on, but if you build a theme, Republicans in Illinois stand for lowering your cost of living. You can then go out to that bank of cameras, which I agree is a great idea. And instead of it being all Madigan, corruption, you can transition it to your message. And that's the key. To win elections, you need to be on your message. But we tend to spend way too much time going, oh, hey, let's see if this sticks. Let's put 7 different issues on a mailer. This is what we do, and it never works.
Here's what I would say to that. I checked this before you said that. You started this podcast talking about the cost of energy. This was over the 2016 $2 billion corrupt ComEd bailout that I worked so hard against, right? So this is about the taxpayer spending. You want to know what the cost of corruption is? It's $2 billion. Just this one deal. That's the cost of corruption. What that could mean to property tax relief, what that means to your energy costs. So there's a way to use it. I agree that you just can't go Madigan. But look, if I'm Gabby Shanahan,
if Mike Z were running things, that's how it would be.
if I were Gabby Shanahan, Harry Benton took over $1 million from the guy. Yeah, I should use it. I don't necessarily have to use it in a mailer, but I certainly put a press release on it and try to get some earned media on it. I certainly have the Republican Party talk about all the people and the millions of dollars that they got through Madigan winning close races, and that's why they're there. So would
Which
you
is
ever have a
probably what
chance
they're going
to
to do. But Mark, this is our problem. Then they're going to be focused on that for the next 4 weeks because we can't seem to chew gum and walk at the same time. And so then it's all these press releases about Madigan. I mean, this is the problem: is we don't seem capable of doing what we're talking about right here, which is using it as a transition to the issues voters actually care about. Instead, we just say, "Hey, so and so took $1 million from Madigan," and we stop there. And once again, we're back to Mike Madigan bad, so vote against Harry Benton.
I won't take away from our conversation about the 40th Senate district that I know that we're going to talk about, but I want to point to the first TV ad that Senate Republicans did in that race against Patrick Joyce. They stuffed a bunch of stuff into it, and then they hit Joyce on taking pay increases, I think, and somehow tried to tie that to Brandon Johnson, Kim Foxx, Mike Madigan, and somebody else. I forget who it was now. Ed Burke. I talked to Joyce this week. He's only met 2 of them, and they were all in passing. So he literally doesn't even know these people. Most of these people had no role in that. It doesn't actually move numbers. And what hasn't Nagel been talking about? Cost of living.
Yeah,
in a place where you're right along the board.
Look, Nagel should not be using it, but to talk about inflation and how corruption brings the cost of inflation and the energy bill, I mean,
that is way too complicated. That is way too complicated.
But you can do that. I think where Mark's right.
You can walk it through gum.
No, you can't. No. Republicans in the state have shown repeatedly that they can't walk and chew gum.
At the bank of cameras, we're talking about the bank of cameras outside the building. That's where you do this because they're not going to run your quote. Listen, Republicans do this all the time. They walk in front of the camera and go, "I'm here to talk about X, Y, and Z." Well, the media is not going to run that if it's not actually relevant to the story or that they're running or interesting. So you have to still connect the dots. So I would use Mark's talking points outside the building. I wouldn't use it maybe in a TV ad. I wouldn't use it on a mail piece, but into the press outside that building, you got to connect the dots if you want them to run your quote. So I think you're both right in this scenario, and that's where I think you're both right. Chris, go ahead.
Look, this all sounds too complicated. That's the problem because what you're doing is you're trying to throw too much information at the voter regarding Mike Madigan. Look, if Madigan was still in office as Speaker of the House and he was under indictment, still in the chair as Speaker of the Illinois House of Representatives, then you could use this. The problem right now is that we know that voters have very short-term memory loss. The former president of the United States got shot a few months ago, and voters already forgot about it. So are we really going to expect voters to remember Mike Madigan and start talking about, Mike Madigan did this with the ComEd bailout, and then they did this and this? This is too complicated. It's way too complicated. You're throwing another name in there that voters need to remember on election day. We're past Mike Madigan. We've been past Mike Madigan ever since the guy stepped down from office and stopped being involved in the state's affairs. We need to talk about cost of living. We need to talk about high energy costs. We need to talk about crime or any other issues that are important to the voters of Illinois. I don't care about Mike Madigan. The average voter does not care about Mike Madigan anymore. It's not going to move as many votes. I think what we're trying to do right here in this exercise is we're trying to find a way to scotch tape Mike Madigan into this election. It's not going to work. Well, I understand the point that that Patrick's making. We have to throw the Republicans are in a position where they do have to throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. But maybe you try that in some districts that you're not going to win anyway. Maybe you try it there, and maybe you go for the Hail Mary pass. But in the districts where we're actually trying to win, and it's going to be very close, going all in on Mike Madigan is not going to work.
Let me close. Let's throw it to Paul, and then I'm going to close this out on this topic. Go ahead, Paul.
Okay. The biggest thing you have to do to throw something against the wall that's going to stick is ask them how much a hamburger is that they just bought at Walmart. How much is a ribeye steak? How much is your gas? How much is your electric bill? That is the key, period. But you've got to be specific. No one says, "Oh, it cost me too much." Ask them how much they paid for hamburger, $8.95 or more. And how much did you pay for the ribeye steak? $17.95.
Go buy
things.
a 12-pack of pop right now and watch your eyeballs explode from how expensive it is. I mean, it's crazy.
Absolutely. So that's the things
we have a toddler. I'm talking about eggs and milk around here all the time.
Yeah. And I mean,
Yeah.
and the cost of diapers and formula and everything. So, Paul, you're absolutely correct. Let me wrap a bow around all this. The point here is, yes, we went through a little bit of a fun intellectual exercise of how could you take advantage of the media opportunities and bring it back still to your message of cost of living. What I don't want anybody watching this to take from this segment is that any of us were saying to be out there talking about Mike Madigan. We went through a little bit of an exercise of, hey, listen, this is how you could bring the Madigan situation to get it to your topic, get it to your issue. It's possible. And if Republicans are capable of doing it, at a certain level, we should engage on that. But our campaigns should be talking about the issues that voters care about. And Chris is correct. It's cost of living. It's the issues that matter, the kitchen table issues. They don't give a crap about Mike Madigan. And all due respect to Jim Durkin from your piece and from your radio show, I absolutely think that one of the reasons Republicans keep losing in this state is we keep going back to that strategy of let's throw more things out there and see what sticks. That has been our messaging strategy for a very long time in the state. And everywhere else in the country, we teach how bad that is, how that is not how you message. That is not how you win in politics and campaigns. And yet, for whatever reason, it's been the prevailing thought in this state. We've also been losing in this state. So maybe A plus B equals C, and we should stop doing that. We don't have the money. We don't have the voters' attention to talk about dozens of issues or this thing over here and that thing over there and throw stuff out, see what happens. We have limited resources, limited attention. We've got to hyper focus on one consistent theme and narrative and hammer it home for the voters. All right, let's keep going along here.
Colin, if I see Tony McCombie in front of the cameras at Dirksen Federal Building this week, I'm blaming you. Just so you know, I'm blaming you.
Speaking of Tony McCombie, this is where at least once per episode I get myself in trouble. Here's where I'm going to get myself in trouble. We've been talking about how the House Republicans have been talking about everything but cost of living, unfortunately. And now this past week, Tony McCombie came out with a press release about voter integrity. And now she's pushing a voter integrity bill and she's calling for a proof of citizenship. When that press release came out, we were 4 weeks or just under 4 weeks from Election Day. As we record this, we are now 3.5 weeks from Election Day. And the leader of House Republicans is coming out with voter integrity and proof of citizenship when we need to be talking about the issues that matter to the voters in this state. It is absolutely a gift. I had multiple people, including several Democrats, forward that press release to me with a giant smile on their face because all this does is helps the Democrats and makes Republicans look crazy the more we engage on voter integrity topics when voters are paying attention, because the Democrats have painted us as crazy on this and they've done it very well. And it draws attention from the issues that voters are actually paying attention to. And I don't understand why we can't get Republicans to hyper-focus and stay focused on the issues that matter to voters, which right now it's cost of living. I don't understand why it's so difficult to get on that narrative and stay on that narrative. So some of you may agree with me. Some of you may disagree with me. Some of you may not want to tick off McCombie, and that's okay. I'll take the heat. But I think this was a giant mistake.
I think it was not necessarily a mistake, but I think it ranks up there in the South. It ranks way up there. If we had the $1 billion that they're going to spend on illegals this year, just $1 billion, and we could spend that in some of our rural areas, or even for that matter, in the areas in South Side Chicago and West Side Chicago, to take care of the kids that really need to be taken care of, or to actually educate children in this state, not with money, but trying to get things where you can encourage teachers to come here because they can feel safe and secure. But I do think illegal immigration is a big problem. And I think that ranks right up there with the cost of living down here. Those are two
Paul,
things that are big.
Just to make sure we're clear. So we've talked about that. And what we've talked about is spending money on non-citizens instead of spending it on our citizens. That's spending. What I'm saying is this was a bill put on proof of citizenship to vote. It's not an immigration bill. It's a voting bill. It's a voter integrity bill is what she has called it. So I don't know that this is immigration related. This is definitely a voter integrity. And that's how she termed it. She didn't push this in her press release. This was not an immigration issue to her.
And it's already illegal for somebody who's in this country illegally to vote. It is already illegal. It is illegal to register to vote if you're an illegal immigrant. It is already illegal. You can already go to prison for this. And now they're trying to pile on because I asked further about this, why they were bringing this. And she said she had a constituent concern. Lots of illegals voting in Carroll County. Lots of
illegals vote. Yes.
No, they don't. There's no proof of that. There's no proof of that.
We don't have the money to prove it.
You're telling lies, Representative.
No, we don't have the money to prove it.
Here's what I'd say. because we don't really want to debate policy here. I honestly don't care what the answer is to the debate back and forth. What I care about is why are we making this the focus in our press releases and we're pushing it out to the public less than 4 weeks from election day? That's really where
I'm involved. I'm involved in several House rep races. It's cost of living, inflation, and property taxes. It's what I see in the marketing. It's what I see the candidates talking about. Just because Tony filed the bill, I don't think that's the theme of what the House Republicans are doing. Yeah, everything that I
Mark,
see.
Listen, I can say this because we don't rely on HRO to pay our bills, thank God. So I can actually be honest and open and transparent. The House Republicans are not talking about cost of living. We've had example after example after example on this podcast. It's not happening. Maybe because there's certain races you are working on, you're forcing them to do so. And if so, thank you. Kudos to you. But overall, there reports all throughout the state that that's not what House Republicans are doing. So I'm going to pile on. If you put out a press release on voter integrity less than a month from election day, yeah, I'm going to pile on. Why isn't that press release about something related to cost of living?
Look, this seems, I got my comments here. This seems like something you file like 6 months before election day and you use as like a fundraising push or something like that. You file a bill just to like send out a fundraising letter or an email saying, the House Republicans are fighting illegal voting in the state of Illinois, and you send that to your grassroots donor list and you get, how much ever amount of money. That is like the best way you could ever use this, but it's a month before election day. I don't even understand the point here, Collin. Like, I get it. Okay, listen, Republicans, they want to talk about illegal voting, election integrity. Listen, I get it. Sure, why not? But I don't understand making a big deal out of this type of bill like a month, like at this time of the election cycle. Like, why? Because when you file it now, you make it seem like you're doing so for electoral purposes. If they did this back in like February in the regular session period, it'd be like, okay, yeah, all right, whatever. We're doing this for whatever reason. Who cares? Cool. But now it's like you don't file a bill now unless you want to use it for election purposes. You just don't do that. So I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. Why did they do this now? It doesn't matter. This bill is never going to pass. You're only doing this for political purposes, so it's not going anywhere. I don't get it.
Well, I think, I've always heard that quote that, whenever you're in the majority, you legislate, and when you're in the minority, you communicate. So the vast majority of bills that are filed by House and Senate Republicans in the General Assembly are messaging bills because, 97% of them probably are never going to make it to the floor for a vote. So I think that this, I agree with this bill. I would love to see it get passed, but it's never going to happen. And I think they probably should have filed something like this. You should have filed something like this in February and then used it in mail.
I don't know if they, just to be clarified, I don't know if they had previously filed the bill or if they filed it with this press release. I didn't check into it that much. All I know is they pushed a press release out on this. So I just want to clarify. We've talked a lot about when the bill was filed. I don't care about when the bill was filed. What I care about is that we're putting out a press release at this time. That's what I care about.
Look, I just looked through like 6 mailers. Every single one of them had cost of living and property taxes in it of everything that I'm dealing with. Every single one of them.
Yep.
Which is where we need to be, but we have not seen those examples in most of HRO's top races.
And it was filed on October 7th. I just looked it up.
Yeah, cool. Appreciate you very much.
3 days ago.
So I think we can put the bow on this topic as everyone agrees we need to be talking about cost of living, whether we agree or disagree with sort of the beginning of this topic. We all agree, talk cost of living, don't get distracted with everything else. All right,
I agree.
Let's keep moving along. We're going to do this one real quick. I just want to point this out. I saw this bill this week, or I saw this press release from, or it's not bad or something from Dick Durbin, and it just made me chuckle just because of this. And we'll be quick here. Democrats are really good at this, at finding these bills that just quote unquote make people's lives better. So he's filing this bill of Protect Your Points, the Protect Your Points Act, requiring transparency in what happens with your airline points and how much they're worth and being able to transfer them between family members. And this is not going to make a major impact on anybody's life, and it's not going to make an impact on most people's lives. But it just reminded me of how Democrats tend to do this better, a lot better than Republicans do, where they find these bills, they find these initiatives, where like, hey, we came up with something that's going to make your life better. And they do this over and over and over, and it helps them build this theme and narrative that Democrats are helping regular people. It's harder for Republicans because we tend to be small government, and so we don't want to push something through government that might regulate something or create more government and create more costs. So I understand why this happens, but here's the problem. As voters are looking for their leaders to help and make their lives better and make their lives easier, Democrats keep coming up with these ideas, these things like, oh, I did X, Y, and Z to make your life better. Well, Republicans just tend to be the party of no that votes against all this stuff. And so we don't have to spend a lot of time on this. It's just something that was, I'm getting on my soapbox for a second. It's a frustration of mine because as we try to message with voters, Democrats have a lot more to work with to say, hey, look, we did all these things that make your life better. And Republicans are like, yeah, I voted no on that and no on that and no on that and no on that. Why? Well, I don't believe in big government. Okay, but voters don't really care about that. We're 40 years after Ronald Reagan convinced voters that government was evil. Voters just don't believe that as much as they did back in the 80s. And so we're losing that war on these things about what makes people's lives better. Y'all may have thoughts, you may not. I know we got campaign topics next, and that's what most of you are here for. So feel free to share on this if you wish. Otherwise, we'll carry on.
I would say, back probably late July, like early August, I was seeing a lot of like digital ads on Instagram and Facebook, like about this topic, about, save our points and make sure that people can, use what they've earned from their credit card companies. But that was kind of, a couple week period, and that eventually stopped. But there was like some discussion on this at one point.
And we like to think as these big, broad, tax topics and economic topics. The average voter, you know what they care more about? They care more about the fact that ads on streaming are twice the volume of the actual shows they're watching, and somebody should fix it. Like, this is the stupid little BS that the average person actually cares about. And so we look at that and we scoff. Really? You're going to run a bill on airline points? But this is the stuff that people actually...
Daylight savings time comes up here.
Yeah, I mean, it's dumb stuff, but this is the dumb stuff that actually impacts people's lives. And Republicans got to get better at getting involved with some of these things that just make people's lives better. It might be a stop sign in a neighborhood, but you know what? If it makes people's lives better, care about it.
Well, I think it just shows that Democrats are significantly better at messaging than Republicans are, because and both Mark and the representative know, as they've sat through hours and hours and hours and hours of votes on small bills. Many of them are local issues that are meant to help a water drainage district or a subdivision or something like that. And those never seem to make their way into campaign messaging. Representative X made water cheaper. Representative Y made our schools better with these small bills, made our schools safer with this small bill. And there's a disconnect between the policy arm and the campaign arm. And I don't know who fixes that.
All right, let's get to the meaty stuff here. Let's talk campaigns. I know this tends to be our more popular topic of our viewers too, so we'll spend the rest of our time on this. The good news is these next couple topics, we've got people here who have been intimately involved in these races. So we're going to get a lot of helpful information from our guests and our experts, which is awesome. Let's talk about Senate District 40. There was a Republican poll done by somebody. I don't know, Mark. You might know who that was. That showed that the Republican in that race, Phil Nagel, is only down by 3 to Patrick Joyce. I'm going to pass it right to you to talk about that, Mark.
So a couple of things. I know when the first report said GOP pollster, we don't consider ourselves a GOP pollster. We polled in the mayoral race. We polled in the Cook County races this year, and we were really accurate in all of them. We made a lot of our polling public before. We just call it like it is. And a lot of people were surprised by the results. But when you look at the fundamentals of the district, Bailey and Pritzker basically tied in that district. I think you had it in your article on it, Patrick. It was like 0.03% that Pritzker won the district by. So, and there's usually some partial precincts in there, so you don't even know if that's wholly accurate. But it was basically a tie. So I think it's an opportunity for the Senate Republicans. The opposite side of that is they have a ton of money. I believe they're already up on, they may be on network TV. They were on network TV last time. You looked at the spend more than I did. But I can tell you that when I look at the raw numbers of a poll, you can kind of look at some of the crosstabs, and throw money on whether you think if you had a bet whether it's one way or the other. I actually think it's closer, a little bit closer at this point in time than what the poll said. So he's running behind Trump and he's running behind the generic ballot. It's like 1, 2, 3 or something like that, real close. And then Trump down 2 and him down 3, 3.5 with the Bush. But I think Phil Nagel, if everybody had equal funding on this, I think Phil Nagel wins. What's going to possibly make the difference is just the spending differential.
Well, and you referenced it. Patrick in the Illinois wrote up this race as well in the past week. So Patrick, why don't you go next?
Well, I think we need to start with the stipulation that it's really difficult to beat Patrick Joyce in that district. He is a legitimate moderate. He's not like some of the suburban members that vote against a bill because they can, simply because it helps them come election time. Joyce is a legitimate moderate Democrat, one of the few that happens to still exist in Springfield. He is a well-known commodity in that district. My folks used to live in Kankakee, so I have a certain understanding of that area. And you know, he's a well-known, likable guy who has made votes that are generally, you know, this is the old Rodney Davis problem where no matter what you do, you're pissing off half your district. So he's had to almost do triage for the last 5 years that he's been in office. But this is also his third straight general election in a row. He had to run after he was appointed in 2019, so 2022 and 24. So there's a ton of familiarity with voters there. He's really shielded himself on some of the worst issues, and Nagel is fine, but and certainly Senate Democrats should be criticized because they seem to have sort of made up Nagel's abortion position. Nagel told me he had literally never spoken about it publicly until I asked him about it. So somehow Senate Democrats came up with the idea that he was 100% anti-abortion all the time, which turns out not to be true. I think that
I'm sure they'll point to like he didn't fill out the personal PAC questionnaire as their reasoning for it.
And the gotcha of, well, he's supported by someone who's anti-abortion is just, it's one of the stupidest gotcha things of our politics. I think it's inherently going to be probably pretty close, probably closer than the 10 that it was 2 years ago, but you have to consider Joyce a pretty considerable favorite just because of the money at this point.
Yeah, I certainly, again, make this 3, Patrick. I agree with you. That you are definite 4, wonderful. No matter what happens here, Nagel is going to do better than he did in 2020. The issue that I'm seeing,
well, he's got some money this time. He had no money 2 years ago,
which is pretty much a lot of the reason why he's going to overperform. And Trump's on the ballot, so that does some things. But the thing to remember here is that Nagel is going to underperform Trump in this district. That's what the polling that Mark has suggests. That's what the Bailey 2022 numbers compared to his numbers suggest. He is going to underperform Trump. So basically, to win this district, he needs Trump to pick up about 6 points from his 2020 numbers in 2024 in this district.
Trump lost
and he
by
really
6.
needs about 7.
Trump lost by 6, Chris.
So he needs about, so Trump needs to basically pick about 7 points so Nagel can underperform him by 1 point and win the district. I think that's a pretty big ask, to be honest with you. Is this going to be close? Yes, I think this is going to be close. What that means by close, I don't know. I think it requires black turnout in the northern and extreme southern parts of the district has to be low in order for Nagel to pull this off. And he needs to get as close to Trump in this district as possible in order to win. But still, props to the Senate Republicans. They have picked their district. This is where they're riding or dying this cycle. And that based on every other district that's up this year, it's the right mathematical calculus. So we're going to see how close they can get. But right now seems like it's going to come down to the wire.
I'm interested if we think it's the right move by Senate Republicans. I mean, by the numbers, Joyce is really was the only one under 10. By candidate quality, I think there will be a lot of people that told you that Sally Owens, who's running against Dave Kaler down Peoria to Bloomington, is a better candidate than Nagel. But again, that's an even tougher district mathematically. And the other question is, you've got to defend a ton of seats in 2 years if you're Senate Republicans. I mean, you've got to defend Seth Lewis and Erica Harris and Dan McCombie and Curran, who's probably going to get a challenge again. I don't think there's any gentleman's agreement like there used to be. So is it the right thing to dump $250,000 or more into a maybe race when you've got so many seats that you've really got to start to shore up now for 2026?
What are you gonna do? Nothing? Are you gonna do nothing?
Honestly, I mean, it's easy for us to sit here and say that. I mean, I've said on previous episodes, I would do nothing and save that money for next cycle. But it's really hard if you're actually in the fight, if you're in the game, to tell your members, hey guys, guess what? We're not going to play in any races this cycle. It's really hard to tell your donors you're just not going to do anything for that cycle. I mean, you can do stuff, you can prepare for the next cycle. It's easy for us to say, and I still say it. I wouldn't, the right strategic call would have been to skip this race. But in the reality of actually being in that position, I don't know that they were even able to. Even if they agreed with us, I don't know that they could have. And I look at that race. Couple things I'd point to in that race. Number one, Batinick and their polling, if they're showing that Trump has a 3 to 4 point improvement, that's what I'm seeing. A lot of polling in the state of Illinois is a 3-ish point improvement for Trump. So I'm looking at these numbers as I think you guys might have a pretty decent poll here, Mark. So kudos to you. Admittedly, I don't think the race is as close as 3, but I do think it is closer than people realize. Again, if Joyce won last time by 10, or I think I had it rounded to 11, but wherever that was where he won, it's absolutely going to be closer this time. I think it's a big win by Senate Republicans. If they end up at this thing at 5, losing by 5, losing by 6, that's improvement in the district. To Patrick's point, it's a lot of money spent to still lose, but it is improvement, and it does show the voters that there's some movement toward Republicans. So,
Mark, did you guys ask on the Haas side of that district, or did you just do Senate?
We did Senate, but we didn't ask for race.
Got it.
But we have the generics broken down, and it's the generic was strong in the 79th, and then obviously underwater in the 80th.
Was Nagel winning 79?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe so.
That's obviously good for Haas.
Right.
So one other thing I'll add is Chris had a really good point about black turnout. We did our research 2 years ago after that election, and we broke down the impact that record low turnout from black voters and extremely low turnout from Hispanic voters, and what impact that had on specific districts. And there was a 4-point impact in that district specifically because of that record low black turnout, 4 points in favor of Republicans. So the other question here is, as we're asking in the Metro East, does Harris taking over at the top of the ticket, does that mitigate some of the problems that Democrats have had with black voters and with that turnout? If so, that is going to take these numbers away from us, not towards us, because we did gain 4 points in the last election in that turnout specifically because of the record low black turnout. So that's another factor just to keep in mind on Senate District 40.
Yeah, and a lot of those the black eastern half of Kankakee, like that east of I-57 or even east of Court Street in Kankakee, that got drawn out of the Haas district 2 years ago. A lot of that is split up between now Nick Smith and somebody else. It might be Will Davis. So you even have a lot of Thaddeus Jones. Thank you. Some of those black voters have been moved out of that district and into a safely black Democratic district.
We're going to keep an eye on it. Certainly gives Politico something to talk about for the remaining 4 weeks of the election. Let's go to our next race. We'll let Michael Butler kick us off on this because it's obviously a race very important to him and his region. We're going to talk about 114 because the hits are flying in this race. Lots of attention. We've rated it. We as in Core and the SFR podcast have rated it as the top race in the state. It's a defense race for Republicans. My English was not great there, but my English teacher doesn't watch, so who cares? And there's been a lot of hits going back and forth. Michael, I know there's Schmidt's putting up signs like he did before that have a lot of messages against Greenwood on some of those signs throughout the district. I know the Dems are starting to run a new digital ad against Schmidt focused on the January 6th and election deniers and keeping elections fair and secure. So they're going with that threat to democracy message as we're 3.5 weeks out. I know there was reporting done on how many doors were knocked down, and according to that reporting, Schmidt's over doubled the number of doors that Latoya has knocked down. So there's a lot of focus has been on House District 114 in the last week. Michael, kick us off. What's going on there?
Yeah, I think just kind of based on what I'm seeing from, both sides of this race, the Democrats kind of view this as a turnout election. They think that they lost because, certain segments of the population here in the 114th, especially African American voters, did not show up for Latoya like they expected her to. So they're kind of taking that approach, whereas HRO and Schmidt, they view this a little bit more as, persuasion and reminding people that, Kevin Schmidt's been fighting for them. As you alluded to, early at the beginning stages of this, Latoya, Greenwood, and House Dems were really hammering the abortion messaging that if Kevin Schmidt got reelected, then abortion is going to be banned in the state, which we all know that, one seat's not going to make a difference on that issue one way or the other. But they were really pushing that. This week, we kind of saw a shift in the Democrat messaging where it's all about Trump, January 6th, and that Kevin Schmidt is a MAGA extremist. So they've got those ads running on digital. I see it every time I open up my phone. So we'll see how that strategy plays for them. But on the Schmidt side, the attacks have mostly been, cost of living, taxes, public safety. They've been talking about some of the illegal immigration stuff and the spending that the state of Illinois has done. So it's definitely two very different approaches that these campaigns are taking. So we'll see which one, how it plays out and which one comes out on top.
Yeah, Michael, your couple points there that I think a lot of us are going to want to talk about. Number one is the shift in messaging. I mean, Democrats shifting from abortion as we get into the final stretch of this race, that is relevant. I mean, maybe it's just in this race, maybe we don't see it elsewhere, but that's something we're looking at and talking about. The second thing is you talked about black turnout. If it's going to have an impact on any race, it very well may be mostly seen in this race. Looking at the data that I just talked about for Senate District 40, we saw that impact of low black turnout move that race almost 5 points more towards Republicans in that district. So the turnout amongst black voters is going to have a big impact on that race. And the last thing, and Michael, I'll ask you to speak to this before we open it up to everybody else. A lot of people, something Kevin used very much to his advantage in his grassroots campaign last time around were these billboards he put up or these signs that he put up. Last time around, he focused on something else. Remind us what that was that he did last time around.
So the first time he did it, last election cycle, a lot of it was related to votes that Latoya had taken when she was in Springfield. Like Latoya voted to double your energy bill. This time, a lot of them are more like positive messaging about Kevin. Kevin Schmidt supports law enforcement, and Kevin Schmidt, will hold the line on taxes, those costs and energy bills. There's one about that. I mean, it's a lot more positive on him as opposed to negative on her.
Okay. Anyone have thoughts on the race?
I am super surprised that Democrats are not spending more money here. I would have assumed that they would be on St. Louis broadcast by now, and they're not. I was under the impression that they were incredibly embarrassed losing this seat 2 years ago. And whether it's the map, because Latoya Greenwood lost a bunch of East St. Louis in the map, it's not the old Wyvetter Young district for those of us that have been around long enough to know who that is.
That makes us all feel old.
This is Michael was probably still in diapers at that point, but when Representative Young died, but it's not the same demographic that it used to be. It's seen as the East St. Louis, the black district, and it's certainly not drawn that way. So that's what gives Schmidt a chance, because there's so much more rural area there, and the population of East St. Louis has dropped. But I was really under the assumption that this was where Chris Welch would go to Waterloo. Like, he would do everything he could to win this seat back, because Greenwood is an ally. She was in leadership. They think they got caught by surprise 2 years ago. I thought it would be guns blazing down there, and we haven't seen it. So I'm wondering, and my next race ratings, this may move out of number one, just because of how little Democrats have committed to this race thus far.
Well, two
I
things.
think, Patrick,
One,
go ahead.
I think it's as you guys tend to say, especially you guys, Chris and Patrick. I do read into things a little bit more than most, but the fact that Planned Parenthood isn't coming actively in this district like they are some of the other districts, and now the fact that they're moving away from that abortion message, these are just two things that make me go, hmm. I mean, certainly in that region, abortion isn't that winning message, and we've been saying that for a while. I mean, Michael, what was it, 3, 4, 5 months ago? We were saying, please, please, please make abortion your number one message in this issue because it's just not a suburban district. It's not how you win this
Yeah,
race.
I mean, abortion always polls significantly worse with evangelical African Americans.
So that's number one. But number two, just one thing I'll throw out there, Patrick, is the question then becomes, if they're not spending money here, which I agree, they're not spending as much as I thought they would, is it either because they don't see it as in play as we do for them, or is it they're so cocky, which I kind of lean towards this side, they're so cocky they think it's done? Because I have a number of Democratic friends who've talked to me about a couple races, especially like Marty McLaughlin, where they're basically saying, we're going to pull our resources. That race is done. There's no reason to even spend any money there anymore. I've been saying this for a bit now, that Democrats are just so cocky right now looking at the polling. And obviously they're getting different polling than you are, Mark, but they're looking at the polling and they're reporting back, this thing's in the bag. We're going to wipe Republicans out. We don't even need to try, which again, for me, cool, get cocky. It works in our favor. But Patrick, to your question, I almost think it's more the latter, that this is them being cocky about the race than it is, them seeding it or thinking that Schmidt's going to win it.
I mean, if they were really
Hey,
committed,
guys,
I would have been
I
on
got
St. Louis.
bounce.
Go ahead, Mark.
Do this. Can I give you 30 seconds? Because I know the next topic, I got to get my kid to work. And I don't want him to be like, can I do clown of the week and then kick off the 80-second real quick?
Yeah, everybody good on Schmidt and Greenwood? We all good on that topic? Yeah. All right. Let me throw it to the next topic here officially, Mark, so you can talk about it. So we're talking about the Nicole race, House District 82. Mark is intimately involved in the race, and Mark does need to go. So Mark, go ahead right away. Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I'm going to start with my clown of the week because I'm going to miss that ending, and I've been wanting to do this. Harry Benton sent out mailers saying he supported the grocery tax cut. He didn't vote for the grocery tax cut. Well, this one might even be better. Patrick, you mentioned it earlier. Harry Benton is running an ad that says she's supported by, Gabby is supported by people who want to ban funding on rape kits, right? This is based on the fact that I, Tony, and other people vote against the budget, that she's supported by people who voted to block rape kits, right? Because we voted against the budget. Well, guess who also voted against the budget this last time? Harry Benton. So the guy's just a walking hypocrisy. It's one of the reasons why, I think he's a pathetic politician who just does and says what he thinks he needs to do to stay in office and tries to have this guise that he's really moderate. When look, it's the commercial is his voice. It's just a pathetic thing to do. On the 82nd, I think Nicole's kind of hitting it on all cylinders. Obviously, it's a race that I think Trump won it by a point. So the House Republicans have been concerned about it. Her opponent has been, lobbing some crazy attacks to her. And they're obviously not sticking for obvious reasons. Her opponent has a lot of baggage. The favorite of the day is her ties to Brandon Johnson. So it's been fun it's been a fun race to be part of, and I think she's going to do really well.
Mark, I know you got to go. Let me just quickly ask you, because we're going to debate this after you're gone, and you're going to be angry that we debate it and you don't get to get your 2 cents in. The question is, are we spending too much money on this race? Some of us have some strong feelings that we are. I know you're involved, so you may disagree that we're spending too much money. It's just with all these other races, you say Trump only won it by X. We're talking about playing in districts where Trump lost by 5 or 6 or 7 or 14. And so a district where Trump actually won, is this where we should be spending $250,000 already and probably more to come? It does. I mean, you want to build a firewall somewhere. I get that. Nicole has a bright future in politics. I get there's a lot of reasons to support her, but it's a lot of money when we've got other districts that we're worried about.
Yeah, I would say one of the things, she's worked hard at raising money, and she's raised a lot of money from people that really don't like her opponent's politics. And that's been on Nicole, and that's been her working hard. So I think a lot of the spend that you see is frankly because of Nicole's hard work. The opponent potentially had access to money. I mean, this is a situation, if you go back to 2018, where the Democrats put $1 million into 8 campaigns the last week with network TV. So you have to build enough of a firewall. So we'll see. I'm not looking at the big picture spend like HRO is. But to spend $250,000 in a race that most people with a not, she's an appointed incumbent. I don't think she should certainly be punished for the hard work that she's done. So I'll let you guys debate it after I go. But she's working really hard. She's at the doors every day. She's at events constantly. She's really dedicated herself to it. So it's really been a fun campaign to be a part of. And in the scheme of things, $250,000, not a lot of money for a state rep.
No one will deny Nicole is a great representative and is going to be a part of our bright future in the state. So definitely no one will deny that. Thanks for being with us, Mark. We appreciate your time.
Appreciate it, guys. Sorry.
You're good. So I'll open it up to obviously some of us are those sort of political people who like to dissect things like this. And again, if you've spent $250,000 and we're still 3.5 weeks out, that means you're going to spend more. The concern is some of these other races that listen, I'm looking at the numbers here. If Trump won this district by 2, heck, Ronner won it by 13. We usually win in that district by double digits, most Republicans. I get she's appointed, but I'm not the only one who's questioning why we're spending. And this is HRO's money. This is not money coming from her campaign. This is coming from the House Republicans that this money is being spent. A lot of people are wondering why so much is being spent in this district. Is it just me, or does anybody agree, disagree?
Well, look, here's the thing. Like Susan Akras, she has one of the best independent fundraising capacities of any, Democratic challenger to a Republican incumbent in the state. Most of the other challengers to incumbent Republicans are being funded by Welch and the House Democrats, and they're not really doing their own independent fundraising. Akras is. She has, well, maybe she isn't. Abel Nasser Rashid is. But still, that is an independent, that is something independent of the actual House Democratic caucus. So there's some cause for concern there that you have an opponent who's capable of raising a lot of money in a district where Trump doesn't do us a lot of favors. So you think to yourself, well, you got to try a little. You don't want to be caught flat-footed here. At the same time, I don't think Akras is particularly strong in anything other than fundraising. It does not seem like the House Democrats are really quick to get involved in her campaign. Nicole's very well liked down in Springfield amongst a number of people, so I don't think Welch is going to come in to help Susan Akras. So while I do think that you have to spend a little bit of money in order not to get flat-footed, I also don't think that this is like a Custer's last stand to your Republican incumbent where you have to spend a lot of money trying to save them. Imagine if this money went to Marty McLaughlin, might be more effectively well used. That's my opinion. But I do, again, Nicole's fantastic. She's going to win. I just don't know if we have to spend all this money to save Nicole. I don't think I think she's good enough on her own to where you don't need to spend this much money to save her.
Well, I certainly think the Trump numbers in that district gave Republicans a little bit of concern for an appointed incumbent who's now the second after Jim Durkin. So it's a completely unfamiliar name. It's an area that's not necessarily trending in Republicans' favor. But I think that Akras has proven that she's not a particularly strong candidate. So certainly Republicans can feel better about that. There's certainly some manufactured stuff about polls and who's saying what, and everybody's a racist and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, I don't think I even put this one in my top 10 of potential races to flip. And I really don't think it is. I understand why they would want to strengthen Laha out of the gate, make her look strong, get some mail out early before she could be defined as someone who's toxic in that district. But it certainly doesn't look like they need to be piling money into that district for the last 3 weeks.
And I think you both make the point. You build the firewall. I mean, you have disqualifiers for the Democrat in that race. Things you can put out there that once it's out there, she is unelectable. So you do 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 mailings, but I'm counting at least 8 and probably more. I'm being conservative here in terms of the number of mailings, plus massive amounts of spend in digital ads and polling and everything else. Like, you can build this firewall here. You can defend your appointed candidate, and you can spend less than $100K to do it. And then you're set, you're solid, and you don't need to touch it again. But again, we're talking about the spigot is open. I don't know. Maybe they'll close it. Maybe this is the end of the spend right now, and they're not going to spend more than this. But there's already a good 150K, if not more, that's being spent. And we're talking about how Republicans don't have a lot of money. 150K will make a lot of difference defending Kevin Schmidt or defending Marty McLaughlin or Amy Grant or picking up a seat. It is a good amount of money, and it may be more in the coming weeks. They may not stop this. There may be more mailings and more ads and more polls, and so it might be more than this that's being wasted on a race that Nicole is very likable. She's a hardworking candidate. She's fine. She's safe. We're good. All right, let's keep moving. I know we're running out of time. We talk about accusations of racism. They work when Democrats do it because, of course, they have their allies in the media, blah, blah, blah. But when Republicans do it, they don't tend to work. It's partially because we're really bad at doing it, but it's also just because it just doesn't seem to work when we try it. And Desi Anderson has unfortunately learned that in House District 91. They tried to make some hay about the fact that there was a couple photos Democrats used where it seemed to lighten her skin. It could just be the lighting of the photos or the lighting of the mailers. You can explain it away, though. To be fair, Republicans never get to explain it away. If we've at all lightened anybody's skin, we are racists. So it is a double standard. Unfortunately, though, Desi Anderson has learned this hard fact that you only get to claim racism if you're a Democrat, not if you're a Republican. I'm sure Patrick's going to tell me I'm crazy because he's got to make sure his Democrat friends don't dislike him. But listen, Democrats
They hate my guts.
racism every chance they get. And Republicans don't ever get to do that.
When the Bloomington Pantograph went and pulled pictures off of her own Facebook page and they were colored the same way.
Except for the one the only one was the one with the snow and everything else. That was significantly white.
I'm not nearly as up in arms at this as you are.
I'm not up in arms about it. I'm just saying
it seems like she's barking up the wrong
Democrats
tree
got to play the race card, then occasionally Republicans should be allowed to do it too. That's all I'm saying.
Is it going to work in that district?
It never works in any districts. It never works.
So again, like, I don't know. Sure, why not, Collin? I don't know.
Nobody cares. This is my lot in life. Paul, this is my lot in life. Nobody seems to care about these things I care about. I just look like the ranting, raving lunatic on these podcasts.
That's
I
my
think
job.
that's good. You need to do that. You need to be a little bit ranting and raving. It's okay.
More appropriately, I think we should be talking about whether House Republicans should be spending the kind of money that they're spending in that district.
We have talked about it. Go ahead.
That is not a top tier district.
That's right, man.
I mean, Scott Preston was top tier for that district in a non-presidential year with your Democratic parts of Bloomington and Peoria, and he still got beaten pretty handily. That is not a winnable district, especially with somebody who's proven to have run such a bad campaign 2 years ago, the way Anderson did. I don't understand the allocation of money. Maybe it's we're trying to protect female candidates so that we can make the caucus look a little more diverse. But
you're in trouble now, Patrick.
I'm in trouble all the time. I don't really give a damn at this point, but
it's okay.
But I think the Republicans are not focusing on the races that they need to focus on to win. Brandon Schweizer isn't getting the money he needs to win. Amy Grant's not getting the money she needs to win. Marty McLaughlin's on the no-fly list, even though Joe Woodward's, I guess, checking in on a weekly basis. You know, it's not a reasonable appropriation of their funds here.
Well, it's going to be a big topic of conversation in 4 weeks. They keep telling us they're smarter than all the rest of us, that, you know, they have done the math and they're being strategic, and maybe we'll look stupid in 4 weeks. More than likely we won't, but we're going to find out pretty soon.
So here's what I'll say. I'm going to do a little bit of defending here. The 91st, honestly, there are some this district isn't that bad for Republicans. I mean, listen, Tom DeVore won it by 3. Demmer won it by half a point. You know, Dan Brady won it by like 17, but, you know, it's Bloomington, so of course he's going to win it by 17. This is a district that Republicans...
Trump only lost it by 8. It isn't that bad of a district, so I'll grant you that.
It's not that bad. There are other districts that the House Republicans are, you know, dumping money into that a statewide Republican hasn't won since... oh my gosh, what was her name? 2016. I'm escaping me at the moment.
Unger?
The 2016 comptroller's race.
Unger.
And we're throwing money into those races. But like, that's okay. Listen, are we going to win this one? Probably not. But I can justify this one spending in this district a little bit better than I can some other ones.
Yeah, I see. I just move that. I'd move that money over to 76. I'd move it over to. I mean, if you're looking for pickup opportunities, 91 is definitely behind some of these other districts. Heck, we're not even touching 66. I know our candidate isn't spectacular there, but the numbers are way better for us than 66. They're way better for us than some of these other districts. I don't understand the money allocation, but I've already ranted about this district 3 other times, so I sound like a broken record at this point. But there's definitely going to be some questions post-election day. All right, one last race, then we'll close down this podcast. We've talked about this race a couple times over the last year and a half. I want to draw attention to it another time just because some people are finally paying attention. Looks like personal PAC is coming into play here for the 3rd District Appellate Court in Illinois. And some other money is being spent in this district. There's some oppo flying around about scaring. So we've got 3 openings on the Appellate Court, all in which Democratic incumbents are running. So if we can pick up even just 1 seat, we're going to make up some ground. And there's 3 Republican candidates. Republicans had high hopes for all 3. I'll be honest. Jason Helen was a former statewide Republican candidate. Jack Costello has a great bio, and a lot of people were super excited about him. Neither of them have really run races, and so the excitement's dropped off about those 2. Kenton Scarron, however, has run a strong race. He's been working his butt off. He's raised money. He's put messages out there. Clearly, he's got Democrats pretty scared, and so they're hyper-focusing on just him in that race. And he does give us, Kenton Scarron gives us a chance here to pick up a seat in the Appellate Court in that 3rd District. This is a race. This is a district that's pretty close. It trends very close, very much along the line. It's a swing district here. I'm glad people are finally paying attention. Let's talk about the race a little bit. Anybody have thoughts on that race?
Well, I did see that like an attack ad from the Democrats where they were going after him for his time as a clerk on the United States Supreme Court, and doing he clerked for the same court that overturned Roe versus Wade and those kind of things. So they are taking that angle. And apparently I didn't realize that Clarence Thomas actually went to one of his swearing in.
Yeah, I mean, Scarron clerked for him. So I mean, they're using the tie to Thomas. They're using his ties. He was a deputy counsel for Rauner. He's gotten money from Dick Uihlein. So they're using all those ties to try to paint a picture. Certainly, the same playbook they've used in these judicial races, which we've screamed about on this podcast in the past, where Democrats use all these political ties, and then Republicans run these sort of standard judicial campaigns, and then we lose. It's kind of a little bit playing out, at least on the Democratic side this time around.
It's kind of funny to me that they're attacking him because of his connections to Clarence Thomas, saying that he's this extremist on abortion and he's going to ban it if he gets on the appellate court. But then they're also attacking him for his ties to Bruce Rauner, who, prior to Pritzker was the governor that expanded abortion rights in this state more than anybody. So, he's got ties to both sides of the same issue, but obviously they're going to play up the abortion stuff because that's what they do.
I have a hard time, and this district is DuPage, Will, Kankakee, Iroquois, Grundy. Okay, Grundy's in there too. So you obviously have a pretty significant rural block there, which is a lot smaller than the DuPage and Will parts of the district. Here's the thing. The Clarence Thomas tie is going to fire up Democrats, but they were going to vote for the Democratic judge anyway. The reality is that we are all sickos, right? We know the 9 members of the Supreme Court. Chris probably doesn't because he failed ethics class, but most of us.
I got an A in college ethics. I majored in philosophy, for God's sake.
But most of us, most regular people don't know who the members of the Supreme Court are, don't give a damn who Clarence Thomas is. I don't know that moves numbers with anyone who's not hyper focused on what the U.S. Supreme Court has done.
Well, and to Michael's point earlier about a previous race, Democrats, their campaigns they're running are turnout races. It is all about turnout for them, which is an interesting tactic because typically in a presidential election year, you don't focus on turnout, you focus on persuasion because voters are coming out. This is Democrats telling us they're nervous about turnout. Otherwise, they wouldn't be running turnout campaigns in every single race. And to your point, Patrick, I think a lot of these messages, the anti-Rauner message, the anti-Clarence Thomas message, talking about the Federalist Society or the Illinois Family Institute or Dick Uihlein, This doesn't work with swing voters, but it absolutely
Nobody
fires up
knows
their
who they
base.
are. Nobody knows who they are.
So it's a base campaign for this judicial race. The interesting dynamic is that abortion message is going to play in like a DuPage County, but this district has a lot of working class areas. It's why Republicans in recent elections have been able to win in this same district. Yeah, by 4 points, but we've been able to win in this same district because it's not all, it's not Lake County. It's not DuPage County, all of it. There are a lot of working class areas in this district where that, solid 100% abortion message that Democrats like to run doesn't play. I think Scarron's got a decent chance in this race. And personal PAC coming into play. If they're not hyper targeted just in DuPage County, it very well could backfire in some areas of the district.
Well, they weren't hyper targeted again when they did this against Justice Burke back in 2022's election. So I doubt they're doing it that way. Here's my thing is that, Scarron's been running a campaign this entire time. And he's been negative on Anderson too in this race. I mean, he's been bringing up Anderson's own, record in terms of how many
tactics we've been begging Republican campaigns to do. He's been doing.
Yeah, he's been doing a pretty good job. My concern is that no other Republican is running a race in this district. I mean, I remember taking meetings before petitions were passed in 2022, and I said, we've got 3 seats up on the appellate court. This is huge. We got to take this seriously. We got to get good candidates. And yeah, there was some hype over Costello, not much over Helen, to be honest with you. But there was some hype over. I speak it like it is, to be honest. But there was some hype over Costello, but he hasn't really done anything. He's got yard signs now, which is nice, and Helen's got yard signs now, but they're not really doing anything. And honestly, their Democratic opponents aren't particularly strong, to be honest with you. They're maybe not as vulnerable as Anderson might be, but you can hit them, but nothing's going on in those other races. So it turns Scarron v. Anderson into the only game in town. And honestly, that's concerning to me, looking at it from the Republican perspective, because Scarron has no, help. He's got no, nobody else is watching a second offensive at the Democrats in that race. And that's what I think the biggest concern is. Can Scarron win? I think he can. It's going to be a very close race. It was very close in 2022. The Supreme Court race went to the Democrats. The appellate court race went to the Republicans. It's going to be close, but I'm concerned that because nothing else is going on there, it leaves Scarron a little bit vulnerable. So that's my take on the race.
Certainly stuck on an island, that's for sure. All right, we've gone over time, and I gotta thank you all for giving us this extra time being with us today. As always, we close with a couple fun segments. First of which is our OG and Clown of the Week. You don't have to participate, but if you've got people you want to nominate either as an OG, meaning they've done something great in the past week, or as a clown, they deserve some scorn in this past week. Typically, we try to keep it to Illinois politics, but if you want to go outside Illinois, that's okay. Or go outside of politics. I mean, Chris and I have brought up the White Sox a few dozen times, so you can go outside of politics if you wish. Anyone have people you want to throw out there or things you want to throw out there for OG or Clown of this week?
I was going to say on OG or Clown of the Week, it's Brandon Johnson obviously is a recurring character on this, but if you watched his press conference, and there was a journalist, and I don't think that you couldn't see her because she was off camera, obviously, but she was asking questions, and it didn't sound like she was white, but Brandon Johnson, fired back at her and basically said that she was condescending and racist for criticizing him related to his overseas trip and his the issues over at CTU. So definitely Clown of the Week.
Wasn't that Marianne Ahern that was doing that? I don't remember specifically now, but I thought
it was Ahern. It could have been, it could have been somebody else. Either way, not only for that press conference, Michael, but I would also throw out, maybe Chris, you were going to say this, canceling 2 months of police academy classes. I mean, just some of the moves Johnson is making is bowing to the far left and some of the promises he's made in his campaign instead of doing what may or may not be, actually correct for the city of Chicago and its residents. To Patrick's point, it's the residents who are paying the price for Brandon Johnson just chasing these politics.
Well, and then for my go ahead. Sorry, I was going to
bring up Brandon Johnson in my own right, but I was going to do it in regards to him denying the Southwest Side their own police district after they voted into their primaries. They won this police district. They got the old armory, the National Guard armory from the state of Illinois for $1. Looked like everything was going in the right direction to get this new police district. And Johnson said, no, we're just going to, put helicopters there. And now across the Midway Airport area, there are now signs in everybody's yard as we want our police district called Brandon Johnson. So, they're very upset about it, rightfully so. So Brandon Johnson on 3 different points, perhaps 4, 5, an infinite amount of points. You are this week's clown of the week.
I mean, my Brandon Johnson vote was based on the Pedro Martinez situation, how he is literally trying to fire the only fiscally responsible person in city government at the behest of his buddies, which is essentially mob-like. But just so that I can be a little bit different than you all, I'm going to go with Marjorie Taylor Greene, who tweeted this week that they control the weather. I don't know if that's Democrats. I don't know if that's Joe Biden. I don't know if that's the Jews. I don't know who that might be, but she's continually proving that she's a moron who's not fit for Congress.
Yeah, the problem is the more that people like that speak out, the more all Republicans get painted in the same light. So saying crazy stuff like that while people are absolutely having their lives and livelihoods destroyed down in Florida. I mean, it may not be OG of the week is everybody who had to deal with their second hurricane in 2 weeks down in Florida. We've got friends, we've got clients down there. It's been heartbreaking to see what they're dealing with. Nobody cares about an election right now. We just want to know that they're safe and healthy. And that's just the reality of what they're dealing with in Florida right now. Anybody else have?
I have OG. I was going to go hurricane related as well with the linemen. Many from Illinois, whether it's ComEd or City Water, Light and Power or downstate, that have literally picked up their lives, gotten in a truck and driven to North Carolina or Florida for God knows how long to live in a swamp in a deserted area for a few weeks to help turn the lights on. They are heroes in my book that don't get talked about enough, and I think they deserve all the credit we can give them.
Yeah, and speaking of which, former guest in this podcast, Brian Javers, down there with his company trying to help with cleanup and safety and getting people out to safety or dealing with those who didn't make it out and making sure they have some sort of respectful end. So just working what's going on.
There are 15 fire trucks from the state of Illinois that are going down. I know that firemen from Marion, Carbondale, Murfreesboro, and I think Anna are on their way down. And there'll be more firemen from all over the state of Illinois going down to just clean up. So I think that's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I agree.
I wanted to give my OGs of the week to both Ron DeSantis and President Biden for actually working together on hurricane pickup and collectively throwing Kamala Harris under the bus and doing so. So I thought that was great for political. And I thought that was great for government. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I love Harris. Like, I took a call. It's like, you're the VP. Stop it. Stop it. All right, I've got 1, maybe 2 clowns of the week. So oftentimes what happens in politics is that both sides are wrong. Or sometimes both sides are right. And you look at this fight between CPS and CTU and Brandon Johnson. I got to throw a little shade at CPS just for this. It's bad optics when you're asking for more money. You're saying you need more money, and yet there's stories about how you've thrown thousands of books away into the dumpster. And when you're questioned about it, you just say, "Oh yeah, that's just our policy." When asked, "Could you sell these? Could you recycle them even? Could you donate them?" And they literally just threw them away. They're not even recycled, let alone donated. Or maybe have a book sale and use that money for supplies for kids. It's bad optics, it's bad policy, and it makes you seem tone deaf when we're sitting here talking about fiscal responsibility and how do we get enough money to educate kids. And you're throwing away, there's pictures, thousands of books in these dumpsters. And apparently, they only caught it in one school. Apparently this has been done in many schools in CPS. And it's horrible optics and frankly, just horrible policy. So that policy itself and the schools that have done it deserves some shade, and I'm giving it to them. The other one is I'm going to do an unnamed. We were talking before we went live with the recording. There are many of you who send me your clowns and your OGs of the week via text message and Twitter and other places. So thank you for that. A few of you have sent me this blog started by a former Republican, where basically in the last month they've spent all their time just bashing Republicans, and it deserves a Clown of the Week nomination. But I don't want to give them the time of day or say the name of it or give the URL because they don't deserve that. So I'm going to do an unnamed Clown of the Week to this group of people, mostly one individual who is in the throes of an election deciding to just air out all his dirty laundry and attack every Republican he can think of. So Clown of the Week goes to them as well.
Which in the same right, you can say go to theillinoize.com and get good coverage.
There you go. All right, closing thoughts. We always close here. Every guest, every participant gets a chance to talk about whatever the heck they want as we close down the episode. Paul, thank you so much for being with us, especially because I know we got you on last minute. Any closing thoughts you have? Thanks for being with us.
I just want to say this has been really a kind of mind opening and enjoyable. I've really liked it. I like the free talk that we can do. We do need so much work in the state, and I still think the Republicans have the right way of doing it. But I do think that we may not message quite as well as what we should be doing. I mean, to me, it's straight out hamburgers, rib steaks, fish, gas, your electric bill. That's what it is. There are some other things with the illegals. Not to disagree with Patrick. I mean, I agree with what he was saying, but there's so many things that we should be messaging that maybe we're not as much as what we should be. But I tell you what, you can't afford to be in the grocery store. I think my wife and I are the only ones here, and I think we're spending about $100 a week more than what we did 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, that's kind of crazy. Now we have been able to buy some wine now, so you got to consider the wine. The wine has gone up also, and that's a really bad thing. I mean, there's certain things that are important in life, and that's one of them: wine and bread.
Yeah, I think we could all agree with that. And honestly, I mean, Paul, you just said it better than most Republicans have said it, which is you can't afford to vote for Democrats. I mean, honestly, I don't care what the theme is, just come up with a theme. That could be it. Somebody texted that to me just last week. I want a yard sign that says, I can't afford to vote Democrat. I mean, there's options. We just need to pick one and run with it and actually be effective with it. And that's where we've struggled as Republicans. We are right on a good number of issues that voters care about. If we could learn how to communicate on them, we'd win some elections.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. Michael, you're unmuted. You go ahead and go next. Final thoughts.
All right. Yeah, that sounds good. Great episode. As always, covered a lot of important topics as we kind of enter this final stretch. And we should have some interesting news out of IEA soon. I got a text earlier today, but I haven't gotten all the details. So next week, there might be some interesting pertaining to the 114th. So stay tuned.
Michael's Lane's been teaching him how to give, the sneak peek to next week, so people will watch or listen. All right, who brought the heat? We got to think about it. Chris, Patrick. I don't want to give Patrick the win. Patrick, go ahead. You're next.
I know that I'm the negative Nancy compared to you guys living in your happy red Republican MAGA world, but I think we should all prepare ourselves over the next 3 weeks that this could be an incredibly bad cycle for Republicans in this state. I still fully expect Republicans to lose seats in the House, in which case, what does that mean for Toni McCombie? She certainly gets a challenge from the right, from the Freedom Caucus Club. The only congressional race in the state that is marginally competitive has been bungled from the start by Republicans. And meanwhile, the party infrastructure continues to be in shambles. There needs to be a serious conversation for Republicans on at least November 6th as to how this party starts to navigate itself to relevance beginning in 2026. Because if J.B. Pritzker's not running for reelection, and we don't know what's going to happen, but if he's not, he's going to try and elevate Juliana Stratton to be governor. And she would be the most liberal, probably many would argue least qualified governor we've ever had. And Republicans are not in a position today to give her any serious challenge. So the party infrastructure, whether it's the state party itself, whether it's the people who have the checkbooks, whether it's the smart people that lead us in the legislature, need to start to take control instead of letting some goofballs on Facebook who think they talk for the grassroots define the party for the next 2 years, because that's a path to losing even more.
All right, Chris, you brought the heat, buddy. What do you got?
I'm offended by the fact that Patrick thinks I'm some type of happy, optimistic Republican. I believe you should tune into this podcast.
Put your red hat on, buddy. Put your red hat on.
I have a blue hat.
He's more against you calling him happy and optimist than he is you calling him MAGA, which I think is kind of funny.
Yeah. Again, you all know what I'm about. Come on. What are we doing here, folks? But Point of the fact of the matter is that Chris finally got a haircut. You should take care of yourself too, those who are watching this podcast, and make yourself look a little bit nice when you're going on your weekly conservative talk show podcast like myself. In general, we're 25 days, 26 days, something. No, we're 25 days, maybe 24 tomorrow from election day. It's crunch time. Silly season is coming up fast if it's not already upon us. Be prepared for what's coming at you, everybody. And don't do anything stupid out there. The thing that upsets me the most about every election cycle is that the Republicans tend to do something incredibly stupid in every type of race, be it a very local county race or be it a congressional race, like a month before election day, and it just makes everybody look stupid. Don't do anything stupid between now and election day, guys. I mean, I know Patrick's right. Make that 5, 6, whatever it's at. Probably going to lose seats. But if you do something stupid and you're the reason we lose 5 instead of 3, like, I'm going to be upset about it. So everyone keep their heads on. Let's all fight to the end, and we'll see what this takes us. All right? Sounds good? Sounds good.
Well, way to go, Chris. Make me regret giving you the bringing the heat for the week. With that, we're going to close on the episode. Thank you to our participants, to our guests for being with us this week. Thank you to Lane Davis, our producer, who's going to be producing this from the corner of his hotel room here in Virginia this week. Really appreciate everybody. We got 3.5 weeks left. This thing is real. We can talk about what may or may not happen in November, but you have 3.5 weeks to change that outcome. After that, we get to talk about, if you want, for weeks, for months, what may have happened on November 5th. But it's only these next 3.5 weeks that you actually get to change that outcome. So get out there, knock on some doors, donate to your favorite candidates, send text messages, work. Make sure you vote if you haven't done it. Get your friends and family to vote. Then we can all take a break. We can all relax and talk politics and say whose fault it was or who deserves the praise. We can do all that after November 5th. Get off your butts and go work to make the future you want. There's my soapbox to end the week. Thank you, everybody. We'll catch you next week on the Smoke-Filled Room.